News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Zoom. My guest this evening is an independent economist, or should I say an independent economist, and he's, of course, Dhanusha Gihan Pathirana. Very good evening and welcome to Newsline, Gihan.
Good evening, Faraz. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Straight away, I thought I'd get into this whole problem. Obviously, Sri Lanka is facing a economic challenge of momentous and memorable sort of proportions, but we're not alone. It's happening elsewhere too. However, I'd like to ask you, in terms of this, the fact that Sri Lanka has very little foreign currency and so on, what's the mismatch in, I think you economists call it a capital flight and so on. How much money do you think Sri Lanka is missing, as in outside?
Yes, Faraz, now we've been trying to get this message across for quite a long time now, because there is what we call in foreign trade, in imports and exports, especially in underdeveloped countries like Sri Lanka. This is a widespread phenomenon that there is a flight of capital from the underdeveloped regions into more advanced capitalist economies, or what we call the metropolitan economies. This is a general condition that we see in the rest of the world, and there's so much of studies being done. Although the studies specifically focusing on Sri Lanka is very much absent, there is a specific study which is done on the entire developing countries, where Sri Lanka is also being considered. And in this particular study, they estimate the total flows. Now, when we say the total flows, it's not only the cash that has flown out. These are the total flows. So it involves assets, it involves currency, it involves also goods. So the estimate is for between 2009 to 2018 is an estimated $40 billion. So,
40 billion?
This
40
amount,
billion?
40 billion. So that is $40,000 million within a period of 10 years. So as you see, the amount is absolutely huge. This study is done by a firm called Global Financial Integrity. And this firm has been at the forefront of global advocacy, especially on getting the message across to world bodies like the UN. Now, in 2015, the UN included into their sustainable development goals as an aim, that is to prevent this capital flight from happening from underdeveloped countries. So global financial integrity was at the forefront of that campaign.
And they estimate Sri Lanka to be missing around 40 billion with a B dollars.
Yes, 40 billion with a B. So this whole trade misinvoicing happens in 4 different mechanisms. So so these mechanisms have different impact. So for instance, if you say there is over invoicing of imports, what you mean by that is that you basically manipulate the prices and the trade volumes to show that there is a greater amount of expenditure than you're actually incurring. So by that way, there is a pure flight of cash or flight of currency that is happening. But then again, there is what we call under-invoicing of imports. So in that context, what happens is that if there are commodities where the taxation is significantly high, there is a tendency for them to under-invoice. So there, what happens is that unnecessary goods are coming into the country. If the correct taxation was paid, then the high probability is that these type of imports would not have made it into the country. So there is, on one hand, there is a loss of foreign exchange by importing unnecessary goods into the country. And there is, on the other, there is a tremendous loss of tax revenue. to the country.
Mm.
So, and also there is an ongoing recurrent loss. Say, for instance, if the under-invoiced commodity is, say, for instance, like a luxury vehicle.
Yeah.
Now, these vehicles will be consuming more and more foreign exchange, consuming fuel and then spare parts and so on.
Yeah.
And as we know, these are extremely expensive, and these vehicles are basically guzzling fuel.
Yeah.
Say, they can't basically travel, say, 4 or 5 kilometers without burning a liter of petrol or diesel. Whereas a normal vehicle, the efficiency is much greater. So there's a recurrent loss also there, which the IMF has also pointed out in a different way in their 2022 country report on Sri Lanka. They have said this vehicle fleet in the country cannot be sustained, and that the government should actually come up with some sort of a plan to get rid of some of these vehicles. So, so that itself shows that there is something is tremendously broken in our market system, and that the market forces itself is promoting these type of unnecessary goods to come in, and there is a loss of foreign exchange, and also loss of savings of the country, because this foreign exchange should be considered capital that should be reinvested productively, and that would be generating high quality employment, and also on the other hand tax revenue. So this is, while contributing to the foreign exchange, the foreign debt crisis, it is also contributing to the government's revenue crisis.
So this 40 billion is actually an awful lot of money in compared to the overall debt position of our government.
Absolutely. Now, currently, it's somewhere around $47 billion. That is the total foreign debt. The total, when you take the domestic debt, it comes to about 90 billion. Yeah. But if we take the total foreign debt, it comes to roughly around 47 billion. So we can see that is about 80 to 85% of the total debt. Now, there is I think one more point we should highlight is that there is a very influential study that is done on 33 sub-Saharan economies. This is an Oxford publication. Yeah. Now, they make the point that the amount of borrowings that these regions have made, 60 to 70% of those borrowings itself flow out through these mechanisms within a window of 5 years. So within a time span of about 5 years, due to this capital flight through trade misinvoicing and transfer mispricing, 60 to 70% of the total foreign debt is flown out of the country, flown out of that region. But as we know, the creditors demand the full payment, whether the money actually flew out or not. They don't really focus on that. They just focus on the repayment.
Right.
So when you see 40 to 30% of the foreign debt only remaining within an economy, it is not hard to imagine that these countries all together go into bankruptcies and face a tremendous debt crisis. So this is also a mechanism that is very much alive in Sri Lanka, although there is no specific study done on it. But the same trends we can see, and the similar data points have been coming out. And even I have been personally trying to dig into this data. It takes quite a lot of time to actually to get all the data points cleared. There is what we rely on is the UN commercial trade data portal. So it takes quite a bit of time to actually uncover these. So and there is no such effort even at the university level, even at the government level, even at the central bank level, to actually do a study on this and to bring in mechanisms to stop these from happening. And now, for instance, even the central bank has acknowledged this is happening in Sri Lanka way back in 2006. They did a publication on illicit or terrorism financing and money laundering. It was a pamphlet of about 60 pages, where they clearly mentioned that trade misinvoicing is used as a means of capital flight out of the economy. So, and if I try to elaborate more on this point now, we know that external imbalance of an economy or balance or imbalance is mainly calculated by the gap in the current account, or what we call the current account deficit in the external sector. So the current account deficit in the past 10 to 15 years has averaged around $2 billion. Right. So, and if we take this particular volume of capital flight, which is estimated to be around 40 billion, and this exceeds the current account deficit also. So, so this itself basically shows the gravity of the problem of capital flight. And so yes, on one hand, the authorities have not taken this issue seriously, and they are not placing the regulatory mechanism that are necessary to stop this from happening. And it is not addressing the root causes also. Now, there are other more structural causes that is basically influencing the market forces. It's almost like an inbuilt force within the market that sort of naturally happens whenever there is a surplus. The tendency is that is for the capital to flow out of the country. So and there are more deeper structural reasons for this, and also more short-term immediate reasons.
We'll come back. We'll come back to that. It's now time for a break in which we take a peek at this evening's headline news from that wonderful primetime news team upstairs. And we are, of course, in conversation on a matter of grave interest and seriousness, our economy. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
President in India for two-day official visit. Rohan Fernando removed from the post of SLT chairman.
Then මේ රටේ ආණ්ඩුවේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ක්‍රියාකරමුයි දිහා බලපුවම අපිට ඉතින් අබසරණයි තමයි කියන්න.
Another suspicious death at the Kegaul hospital. Concerns mount over low-quality medicine. MPs sign no confidence motion against Health Minister Keheliya Rambukwala. Restrictions on over 300 imports, including vehicle spare parts and furniture, to be lifted. Central Bank of Sri Lanka bill passed. 133 MPs not in parliament during the vote. Who benefited from the wheat flour tax change?
මීට පෙර මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කතා වුණා සීනු බදු මංකොල්ලේ. ඊට වඩා වැඩි පිටි මංකොල්ලයක් මතර සිදු වී තිබෙනවා.
Pakistan defeats Sri Lanka to join India at the top of the World Test Championship standings.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And welcome back to Newsline. I'm in conversation this evening with an independent economist, obviously a very patriotic one at that. Dhanusha Gihan Pathirana is with me this evening. Now, Dhanusha, you explained to us about this capital flight, and it's about $40 billion when our debt, I think, is about 47 billion. So clearly a lot of non-implementation or extremely poor implementation. But let's take a look at the other problem. Currently, a lot of controversy about the domestic debt optimization. A lot of people say that the banks have got away with it. That's what they sort of say. How true is this?
Yes, so this is absolutely true. And on the other hand, we see a huge hit and on the workers' savings, on the EPF and the total superannuation funds, or what we call in general the pension funds.
Yeah.
A massive hit on the pension funds, which amounts to each year, mind you, each year 0.5% of the GDP.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so huge that it will basically wipe out the entire earnings of the fund within a matter of about 8 to 10 years. because 0.5% of the GDP is calculated each year. And as we know, the GDP will increase with inflation. And the nominal amount that is accrued to 0.5% would increase also, similarly 7 to 8% each year. We don't see the fund's revenue growing at the same pace. So what we see is the amount of deduction from the fund is increasing at a rate greater than the incomes of the fund each year. So there will be a point that the deduction will be actually so great that there will be no income left in the fund in about 7 to 10 years. And similarly, the point you were making about the banks, I would like to say it's the entire private sector, the private bond holdings. If we look at the ownership composition of the bonds, we see 50% of the total bonds and bills, that is out of the 12.8 trillion that is in the form of bills and bonds as of end of 2022, right? 50% of that amount is held under the private sector under various ways, like you get banks holding bonds and bills, and you get individual corporations, and you get non-banking financial institutions like finance and leasing companies, and then you get individuals. Out of this, majority is under the banks. But what we need to point out here is what we don't see immediately is that the banking sector does not operate on its own equity or own capital. It primarily operates on the cash flow that is coming through the depositors. And what we know is that the top 5% of the depositors hold a tremendous amount of the total deposit of the banking sector. So these people are paid extremely high interest rates. And how are these interest rates paid for their deposits? Their cash is being parked at a rate by the banks in these government bonds, especially the government bonds that go up to about 25, and some of the yields were like over 30 to 32% last year, the bonds that were issued. So, and on the one hand, most of the bonds that were issued last year, now our interest payments problem, actually most of the interest, the high cost interest bonds were issued last year, 2022. So out of that, 1.7 trillion was snatched up by the private sector, whereas in terms of the bonds, the EPF and the ETF only bought around 350 billion. So what we see is the total high cost bonds has been concentrated in the private sector, not among the superannuation funds. But government has targeted, together with the central bank, has targeted the low-cost fund of the EPF and ETF. And they are further attacking, further slashing the future savings of the working people. Whereas they have given an opportunity to make tremendous amount of incomes through interest, which of course we call it an unproductive income, especially given that the interest rates were hyped up because of the tremendous imbalances that were created in the economy. And this high interest income gain that these people are actually now receiving has not come out of their entrepreneurial talent or whatever, right? So and what we see is that the market interest rates have collapsed tremendously. So there's plenty of room for the central bank to restructure these bonds without having any sort of adverse impact on the banks. What they have done right now is that they have given an opportunity for these people to earn tremendous capital gains also. On top of the interest yield, what we know is that the price of the bond multiplies when the interest rate collapses like this. So when you have interest rates of 25 to 30% on a bond, and market interest rates are like 10 to 12%, your price is going up by 200 to 300%. So the central bank is not basically touching those incomes that are actually generated through unproductive means, whereas the people who are actually working or contributing to the economy, they are being attacked for the next 15 years, and their fund is the total income of the fund is about to vanish in about 8 to 10 years. And mind you, to make an additional point, now recently it was revealed in the COPE committee meeting by the Inland Revenue that as much as 904 billion in taxes were evaded by the conglomerates or the private sector the businesses. And then there is now recently there was an updated figure that elevates that number to exceeding 1 trillion. So now these same people are holding government bonds. They so they are not being restructured, while these people have evaded taxes to like a huge proportions, which also creates government debt. Now when a particular entity is evading taxes, that amount that was actually due as revenue for the government, now the government has to borrow it and pay an interest also. It would have been a clean income for the government. Now who is actually lending to the government? As we said, half of the domestic debt is under these people. So after they evaded the taxes, they have created an opportunity for them to reap even more profits by making government borrow more. And those evaded taxes will go into the government in the form of debt.
In your financial studies, and as we come towards the end of the program, in your financial studies, have you also looked at the potential legal issues surrounding this, the legality of all this?
Legality of what exactly?
Of
the evasion of taxes?
Where you say that the banks have been have sort of got away with it in a way.
Yes.
Whereas the others are being taxed.
Yes.
So in this apparent inequitable scenario, isn't there? Have you looked at the aspect? Have you looked at it from a constitutional aspect, where the equality before the law and all that?
Yes. Now there is a team of lawyers who are actually working on litigation, on actually filing cases against this injustice. So clearly, this is a violation of fundamental rights, and clearly people can go in front of the Supreme Court and then demand justice. But then again, it all depends on how the verdict comes out. So I don't want to comment on that. It all depends on how the Supreme Court views these issues. So, I mean, one more point I would like to make about that tax evasion is that the government could have made a very clear decision to deduct the bond holdings of those people who actually evaded the taxes, because this option I have also discussed with former EPF fund managers and so on, and they were clearly for that type of a measure. So without slashing the only savings of the working class, and these savings, mind you, a section of the working people would contribute to this fund even by foregoing their essential needs. Without even sufficiently meeting their essential needs, they are contributing to these funds. And end of the day, central bank goes and invests these bonds in portfolio funds in very precarious government bonds, and they themselves decided to slash it. So where is the equity and justice in this type of conduct? That's something we should really raise.
Where is the equity and where is the justice? Gihan Pathirana, thank you very much for being on the program, and we much appreciate your time. We do hope that government will listen to some of the things that you're saying, because to us, the public, it sounds to be sound analysis of the real situation. Thank you very much, Gihan.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And that's the way it was on Newsline this evening. It's now time for the primetime news. Take care. Have a great evening as much as you can. And God bless you all.